I should have erased that recording, thrown it away, pretended I never heard it. But I couldn't, because what that voice said, what that one voice said, it wasn't just impossible, it was as if the past itself had spat out a truth that no one had the courage to face. My heart stopped for a second, my hands froze, and breathing was like swallowing a stone. It was her, Judith Monroe, disappeared in 1973, buried without a body, without an answer, without a farewell, and now she was reporting a crime, almost 50 years after she died. I stood there, staring at the monitor as if it were possessed, and for a moment, just a moment, I swear I felt someone behind me. I didn't hear footsteps, I didn't smell anything, but the air changed. It became thick, electric, like something was watching my reaction, wanting to see what I would do with that cursed message. He's back. He's in the blue house, like before. That's what the voice said. Same voice that I heard when I was still a boy, when my father, sheriff before me, played those tapes at home. Tapes that he never wanted to explain, that he told me to keep and forget. That, according to him, only brought pain. But no one talks about that case. The city learned to keep quiet. So did I, until now. Since that dawn, I've been living as if I were walking on glass floors. Every memory, every sound, every smell brings back a piece of what I tried to bury. And now there's no point in running anymore, because something deep down wants to be remembered, wants justice, wants to scream. And it all started. It started. It was reopened, torn, violated. The instant that forgotten name flashed into the system, I was pulled back. No choice, no air. Pulled back to 1973, for Judith, to the blue house, for everything my father tried to hide. Do you believe that someone can speak from the grave and be heard? Because that's what happened to me. And what came next was even worse. Pay attention. What you are about to hear is not in any report, nor in the police station files. It is the kind of thing that many people would rather forget, but I had no choice. Like the video now and subscribe to the channel, because what happened in that blue house still haunts me, and you'll understand why. There are things we hear as children that we never forget, and not because we were made to memorize them, nor because they became a legend repeated around the campfire. It's because it hurts. It stays somewhere, between the stomach and the throat, like a knot that never comes undone. Judith Monroe. That name stayed with me like that, like a splinter buried too deep to remove without bleeding. I must have been about 7 years old when I first heard it. I remember my mother lowering her voice on the phone, covering her mouth with her hand, as if the walls could hear. My father, then a sheriff, left that night without saying where he was going, just put on his uniform, grabbed his belt, and slammed the door. I didn't see him again until morning. His eyes were red and he wouldn't let me near him. He never did when he came back like that. I learned not to ask questions. I just watched. Judith's case was not just another disappearance. It was the disappearance. That scarred the city like a badly made scar, the kind that itch when the weather changes. No one really knew what had happened. A 17-year-old girl, a straight-A student, a face from a photo shoot, a church family. She disappeared on a Thursday on her way home from piano lessons. She was never seen again. Only her bicycle was found. Leaning against the back gate of the Blue House, one of those abandoned houses that everyone swears has a story, but no one wants to go inside to confirm it. The Blue House became a symbol of everything the city wanted to forget. Some said they saw someone inside days later. Others swore the bike only appeared there the following week. The police searched for weeks. The girl's name was heard on the radio. There were helicopters, people from outside, volunteer hunters, psychics. Nothing, no clues, no bodies, no answers. My father was in his early 30s at the time. He was respected, tough-minded, but humane. He was the one who coordinated the search. He was the one who, in the end, wrote the report that archived everything. And he was the one who never entered the Blue House again. He never walked down the street again, to be exact. We would go around the neighborhood when we went to visit my grandmother. At the time, I thought it was because he hated traffic. Over time, the city fell silent. But the looks don't lie. I grew up feeling the weight of being the son of someone who didn't solve Judith's case. Children whispered. Adults measured me. He's the police chief's son. They didn't even know the exact position, but they knew the burden. And when, years later, I agreed to wear the same uniform, it was as if I had signed a pact that I never quite understood. I can't say exactly when I decided to follow my father's path. Maybe it was because of the pressure, maybe because of the desire to fix something that wasn't even mine. Or maybe because deep down, I believed that there was still something wrong there. Something that no one wanted to dig up. My father died without saying anything about that case. He left behind organized folders, papers stored with almost ritualistic care. But about Judith, nothing. No direct reference, as if he had erased any trace that it had ever crossed his desk. But we feel it when something has been forcibly torn from a place. Space remains, silence remains, absence remains, screaming louder than any presence. When I took over as sheriff, I had already worked as a patrolman, guard, evidence room, and every other job they could throw at me. I deserved it. At least that's what I kept telling myself. But the truth is that I carried a shadow, and it wasn't just the shadow of the position. It was the shadow of the poorly told story. The shadow of the town that never got an answer, the shadow of the girl who never came back, and most of all, in the shadow of my father. There was a night, and I remember it so clearly it hurts, when I thought I had it all figured out. I was 27, newly promoted to deputy sheriff. I was organizing old files, typing up records that were still on paper, when I found a manila envelope. No label, no identification. Inside, just a photograph. The blue house, but different, more alive, with wilted flowers in a vase, a yellowed curtain in the window, and a bicycle propped up against it. It was her bike. It made me suddenly nauseous. I had to go outside to vomit. When I came back, the envelope was gone from the table. I searched like crazy, rummaged through everything. No one knew anything. To this day, I don't know if it really existed or if my mind played tricks on me. But ever since that day, I knew. Something about that case was closer to me than I wanted to admit. I never told anyone about it. Not my wife, not my patrol partner, not the town pastor who insisted on chatting with me at the grocery store. It was a silence I carried with shame, as if admitting that it was consuming me was a character flaw. But the truth is that I became obsessed. Every false lead, every rumor, every missing teenager in another city, everything became a reason to reopen the wound. I became a functional sheriff. Yes, strict, respected. But there were days when I would stop in front of the blue house with the car turned off, looking at the empty windows, trying to understand what my father saw there, what he hid, what he didn't have the courage to tell. Sometimes I think he knew more than he could handle, that the truth was too big to swallow. Other times I think he was guilty of some omission, that he protected someone, or, worse, that he protected himself. But nothing ever really made sense. All that remained was this weight, this present absence, this name whispered between the teeth of the elders, like a curse that no one wanted to invoke completely. Judith, a teenager who disappeared one afternoon. A story that should have been forgotten over time, but it never went away. That grew with me, that shaped me, that tormented me, that maybe in some strange way chose me. Now looking back, maybe that obsession wasn't mine, maybe it was hers. And you, have you ever had the feeling that something is watching you from the inside, waiting for the right time to be remembered? There are nights when you feel like you shouldn't be awake. I can't explain it. It's as if the silence had a different sound, as if the air inside the room was heavier. It was one of those nights. A little after 3 in the morning, lukewarm coffee on the table, paperwork piling up in the new system at the headquarters. It was supposed to be just another routine check, matching reports with records, adjusting some old files. Nothing major. Nothing that would justify a shiver down my arm or that uncomfortable pressure on the back of my neck as if someone were watching me. But I felt it. On the screen, everything was normal, at least until the bip. Dry. Fast. That notification sound that the system makes when an incident is reported even outside of business hours. At the time, I thought someone had filed a complaint via the app or that it had been a mistake. The center receives prank calls every week, but something was strange. The file didn't load. Like the others, it came as an external attachment marked as recorded voice. And the time, 03:17. There was no phone call, just the audio. I clicked. The silence lasted 2 seconds, maybe 3, long enough for my breathing to slow. And then the voice began. "This is Judith Monroe. He's back. He's in the blue house, just like before." The mug slipped from my hand. It hit the floor and broke. I didn't even move. I just stood there, staring at the screen like someone seeing a ghost emerge. From a mirror, the voice was clear, crisp, feminine, young, shaky but firm. There was no distortion. It didn't sound doctored. It was like a real phone call, recorded live. But it didn't make any sense. I couldn't make sense. Judith Monroe disappeared in 1973, almost 50 years ago. She was presumed dead. Her case turned to dust in the files and shadows in the corridors of the police station. And now, out of nowhere, her name appears in an automated complaint, coming out of nowhere, in the bay. Middle of the night? I tried to take a deep breath, but the air wouldn't come in properly. My fingers trembled as I pulled up the header of the record. The system showed the source of the audio, a landline number, an old prefix, almost forgotten. I turned on the Central's internal tracker, which cross-references the number with data from carriers. And that's when the ice pierced me. Line inactive since 1987. I tried to retrace it. Confirm. I refreshed the dashboard. I opened another terminal. The number was real. It existed. But it was deactivated almost 40 years ago. No use since. No incoming or outgoing calls. No recent activity history. But the police station system received it, recorded it, as new, as if it had just happened. Judith Monroe. I whispered the name without realizing it. It sounded strange outside my head. A buried name, choked, torn from the depths of memory and thrown there, raw, in the silence of the room. And then, a second later, the feeling came. One that no one likes to admit. The silent certainty that you're not alone anymore. I didn't hear the door open, or footsteps. But the atmosphere changed. The kind of change that only those who have seen something wrong can identify. The room's sensors still showed normal temperature, but I swear, it was colder. My entire body responded before I could even think. That adrenaline change, that tension in my shoulders, my gaze searching for reflections on the screens, as if I expected to see someone behind me. But there was no one, just me, and her voice, recorded in the system. I checked the time. 3:17 a.m. I've always hated that number. Something about 3 in the morning always seemed wrong to me. And to think that the report came in at exactly that minute, it made my throat dry. I opened the call center's database to cross-reference it with past occurrences. No calls, no alerts, no bulletins, nothing that would justify that audio, no reason for her name to appear. More to the blue house. That house still existed. The structure was there, closed, condemned, almost swallowed by the bushes. It was a graffiti spot, a meeting place for brave teenagers and a legend of drunks at the bar. But it was there, in the same place where they found the bicycle, the same place where, according to some, they saw a girl knocking on the window days after she disappeared. I pressed the replay button. Her voice came back again, same cadence, same tone, no variation, nothing that suggested editing. And as much as I tried to convince myself that this was a mistake, a trick, a glitch in the system, something inside me said otherwise. It said that this was real, and that I had just opened a door that perhaps should never have been touched. The complaint was clear, a warning. He's back. He's in the blue house, just like before. But who was he? Why now? Why me? I stood there, staring at the open file, feeling the blue light from the screen hit my face, as if it itself was watching me. Judith, the girl my father couldn't save, the girl the city forgot, the girl who, that morning, decided to talk again. And maybe, just maybe, he was talking directly to me. I don't know what I expected to find in that house. Maybe nothing. Maybe just dust and the weight of memories that weren't even mine, but instinct. The same instinct that sometimes makes you pull your gun before you even see the danger, told me I had to go. Alone. No warning. No backup. No radio on. Just me and the scent of what was wrong. And it was wrong. From the moment I pulled up in front of the blue house, I knew something had changed. The facade was the same as it had been since I'd last walked by years ago. Peeling paint, windows covered with haphazardly nailed boards, the porch crooked and swallowed up by weeds. But the gate was leaning. Not broken, not forced open. Leaning, as if someone had broken in and left it open on purpose. When I pushed the rusty grate, it groaned loudly, that dry sound, like the scream of an old thing being forced to move, pierced the night and gave me the distinct feeling that I had just woken up the house. The air there was different, colder, as if the place had its own climate, independent of the rest of the city. I approached slowly, stepping where the grass was shorter. The wood of the porch creaked beneath my boots, but it didn't give way. The door, like the gate, wasn't locked, or even open, just ajar. And as I stood there with my hand on the doorknob, I felt my stomach turn, because the smell wasn't just mold or rotting wood. It was sour, too sweet, a mixture that reminded me of rotting flowers and something old, forgotten, poorly buried. I pushed the door. The creaking sound spread through the house like a whisper. The first thing I saw was the living room, empty except for an old couch covered in a dingy sheet and a child's wooden horse in the corner, painted pale blue. The toy was rocking, very slowly, and I swear the air was still. There was no wind in there, no windows were open, yet the horse was moving, as if someone had just left it. I blinked, took my hand off the gun in my belt, and walked calmly. The wood floor creaked, and each step was a memory hitting the walls. I looked around. Scuff marks on the floor, as if furniture had been moved recently, dust cut in neat trails. Footprints? I couldn't make out what they were, but something, or someone, had been there recently. I walked down the hallway. The walls were peeling, covered in damp stains, and what looked like childish scribbles drawn with crayons, perhaps. Simple things, flowers, stick figures, something that looked like a house, and, in a darker corner, what looked like a strange, elongated figure with disproportionate arms and a featureless face. That froze me for a second. I took a deep breath. I continued. The hallway floor was cleaner than it should have been, as if someone had walked through it many times. I passed a dirty bathroom, broken tiles, a shattered mirror. I saw my fragmented reflection and had the strange feeling that I didn't recognize myself at all. The last room was the one that bothered me the most. The door was ajar, and a strong smell of paint hit me before I even entered. When I pushed it with my shoulder, the hinges didn't make a sound. The atmosphere was too quiet. And then I saw. The walls were covered in numbers, dates, handwritten in what looked like charcoal or very dark graphite. Some were almost erased, others were scratched hard, sinking into the plaster. There were dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all in chronological order, starting with 1973. The first one, near the door, was Zakis Isezo 7, 1973. Further on, I saw 1978, 1985, 1993, 2001, 2010. My head began to throb. My breathing became heavy. That couldn't be there. That didn't make sense. Who wrote all that? When? Why? I walked slowly to the wall opposite the door. The dates were getting closer to the present. 2017, 2018, 2019. And then right in the center of the back wall, a date written in a cooler line. The charcoal still looking damp. Yesterday. No day. No month. Just this. Yesterday. I took 2 steps back without realizing it. My hair stood on end. The entire room seemed to change temperature. The silence grew denser. Time stood still. There, in that moment, I knew I was not alone. Not physically, perhaps, but spiritually. That house remembered. That house was alive with the memory of everything that had happened inside. The floor creaked behind me. I turned around. Nothing, empty, but there was something in the corner. An old portable radio from the 70s. It was on, but there was no sound. The red light was on, indicating that it was receiving a signal. I picked it up carefully. No noise, no stations, just that electric silence that chilled me to the bone. I shined the flashlight on the ground. There was a doll. It was burned on one side. One eye was missing. The other was made of glass, slightly greenish. Its head was tilted to the side, as if it was listening to something I couldn't hear. Next to it was a yellowed leaf, stuck to the ground by some dried substance. I couldn't get it off. It was stuck, but I managed to read part of what it said. Again, he comes back when no one remembers. He comes back when he is forgotten. Time seemed distorted in there. I was sure minutes had passed, but the clock read almost an hour since I'd walked in. I could feel a strange ringing in my ears, the kind of sound that comes right before you pass out. I leaned against the wall. The dates seemed to move. The word yesterday pulsed. I left that room as if I were emerging from water, heavy, dazed. Each step back to the door was an effort, as if the house didn't want to let me go. The wooden horse was still in the same place, only now, still. I closed the door behind me. I leaned against it. I didn't lock it, and I stood there on the porch for a few seconds, trying to understand what all this was trying to tell me. The blue house wasn't abandoned, not really, and whoever, or what, was inside. He knew I went there. I returned to the police station with my soul in tatters. The images of the blue house wouldn't leave my mind. The burned doll, the radio on, the dates on the walls, especially that last word written with fury, yesterday. That wasn't just symbolic. It was a warning, a reminder, a direct provocation. I closed the room, turned off the lights, and sat alone in the archives. That part of the police station still had old metal cabinets with yellowed labels, full of dust and the smell of old paper. It was a piece of time that my father never let die. I avoided that space. I always had. But that night, something was pulling me, as if Judith herself, or whoever was behind it, wanted me to go back there, to see what had been hidden. Her case file was in cabinet C14, criminal file, letter M, number 1973082. I took out the folder with sweaty hands. The leather of the file still had the smell of old ink mixed with humidity. I opened it slowly. Documents, reports, black and white printed photos, the bike registration, the family's statements. Everything seemed to be there, except it wasn't. There were missing pages, lots of them. I was familiar with the reporting style of the time, and this didn't add up. The summary mentioned a wiretap, but there was no transcript, no audio attachments, nothing. And for some reason, I couldn't accept that it was just a filing error. My father never made mistakes like that. He documented everything with almost obsessive precision, and that only made it clearer he deleted something on purpose. I went back to the media shelf. There was a smaller locked cabinet marked Miscellaneous Recordings, 1970-1980. The key was in my living room, in a safe that no one used anymore. I picked it up, unlocked it, and found boxes of cassette tapes stacked like layers of dust from time to time. Coded numbers, hand-scrawled labels. It took me almost half an hour to find something with her name on it. A small, reel-to-reel tape with the inscription almost faded. JM0773. I could barely read it, but when I ran my finger over the ink, it smeared. That was it. I took it to the police station's listening room. We still had a working device, used out of curiosity rather than necessity. I put in the tape. I took a deep breath and pressed play. The sound crackled at first. Static, creaking, background, noises, then a voice, low, trembling, almost a whisper. "This is Judith Monroe. I saw him again. He's back. He's in the blue house. Please. He doesn't know I saw him." My heart raced. My jaw clenched. I recognized the voice, not just because it was clear, but because it was the same that I heard in the complaint received a few days ago. The same intonation, the pauses, the urgency. It was like listening to the same clip at two different points in your life. And the tape was dated 1973. I released the button and walked away. The room seemed to have shrunk. The sound of that girl from almost 50 years ago still hung in the air, vibrating off the walls, echoing inside my chest. I stared at the recorder as if it could give me an answer, but all it gave me was silence. I took the tape and the recent complaint. I put the two audios on different channels, put one earphone in each ear. I synchronized. The result left me paralyzed. It wasn't similar. Era identical. The pauses, the timbre, the nervous inflections, the way she pronounces blue with a U, and as before, as if she's afraid to say it again. I took the audios to a digital forensics lab. I didn't say much. I just said I needed a comparative vocal analysis. Voice depth, spectral signature, tonality. The expert called me 2 days later. "Look," he began, hesitantly. "I've done analysis on identical twins, on distorted recordings, but this here," he turned the monitor toward me. "Two sound waves nearly overlapped, perfectly aligned. They are the same voice, same vocal register, same pressure, same apparent age, same person, recorded in the same physical state, as if the two recordings had been made at the same time." I was speechless. Part of me wanted to hear it. The other part didn't know how to deal with what it meant. "What do you mean by same physical state?" I asked, with a metallic taste in my mouth. "I mean, this girl is the same age in both recordings. It's not someone who got older and tried to imitate the voice. It's like no time has passed between the two recordings." My head was spinning. I walked home with the recording playing over and over in my mind. And a new possibility, absurd, yes, but painfully insistent, began to form. Judith was alive, or someone really wanted me to believe that. I went through all the records of missing people with similar names. I looked for anonymous reports from a female voice over the last 20 years. Nothing. But the more I looked, the more I felt like I was being manipulated by something bigger, something that went beyond logic or my understanding. I went back to my father's file. I started looking through personal documents, diaries, drafts, old notebooks locked away in his old living room, and it was there that I found a hidden note behind a photo of our family on the back cover of a diary. Just 2 sentences written in pencil, almost erased. "She tried to warn. I didn't hear in time." The handwriting was his, and the pain in the lines of the words was visible. I wondered, what was he trying to protect me from? Or rather, of who? And even more, why now? I don't know what brought me to Mauro's house that day. He was one of those faces that had always been around when I was a kid. My father's patrol partner, 20-something years older, always with a lit cigarette before he even got out of the car. Retired for a long time, he lived isolated on a farm at the end of town. One of those places you can only get to if you know exactly where you're going. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was the note I found hidden in my father's diary, or maybe it was just the fact that everything was starting to spin too fast, and I needed someone who still had memories of what no one else wanted to remember. Mauro was that someone. I arrived unannounced. I knocked on the door 3 times. Nothing. I was about to leave when I heard his hoarse voice coming from inside. "The door is open. If you came to talk about your father, come in right away." I went in. The house smelled of mold, old tobacco, and something unresolved. Mauro was sitting in a deep armchair, covered by a plaid blanket despite the heat. His eyes were sunken, yellowed by time, but they were alive, and when he looked at me it was as if he had been waiting for this moment forever. "I saw your face in the paper yesterday," he began. "They say you reopened Judith's case." I nodded silently. "This will destroy you, boy." I sat in the wooden chair across from him without touching his back. I was prepared for a difficult conversation, but I had no idea how heavy it would be. I told him everything. Judith's connection, the visit to the Blue House, the dates on the walls, the 1973 tape, the voice analysis. He listened to me in silence. He smoked 2 whole cigarettes. When I finished, there was a moment of silence that seemed to last a decade, and then he said, "Your father covered up for the murderer." My body froze. It took me a while to understand if I had heard correctly. Mauro wasn't even looking at me now. He was staring at the ashtray, as if he didn't want to see my reaction. "What?" I whispered. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, as if returning to a place he never wanted to set foot in again. It was his brother, his uncle. That went through me like a bullet. I felt the chair disappear beneath me. I tried to reason, but my mind wouldn't connect the pieces. My uncle, missing since I was a child, always. Treated like a disgrace to the family. I never really understood why. They said he left after a big fight with my father, that he disappeared into the world, that he never showed any sign of him again. There was never any news of his death, only silence. He was problematic, Mauro continued. He always was. He had a difficult mind. He would be away for days. He would come back strange, empty look, slurred speech. The town started to suspect, but there was never any proof. Until Judith. "That girl," he shook his head. "What did he do to her?" "No one ever knew for sure," Mauro replied, his voice low. "But your father found out. He found the tape. He found the room, the objects, the bike." I felt a surge of anxiety. The image of the scratched walls came to me like a punch. Mauro discreetly wiped his eyes with the sleeve of his shirt. For the first time, I saw genuine sadness there. He could have arrested him. He could have turned him in, but he was his brother. Blood of his blood, and he couldn't take it. So he covered it up. He sent his brother away. He told him to disappear. He told him never to show up again, and he sealed the house. But he didn't destroy anything. He left everything there, as if he couldn't touch it. The silence was unbearable now. I felt like breaking something. A trigger of injustice was shooting through me like fire. Judith. Other girls, maybe. My father. The same man who taught me the value of truth, while hiding. The town's worst secret, and I inherited his uniform, his chair, his curse. And the recording? I managed to ask, my voice breaking. The complaint that appeared now? Mauro nodded slowly. That's another thing. That house had a system. Your uncle was obsessed. He recorded everything. He installed an automatic voice recorder on a timer. I don't know how it worked exactly, but it captured sounds, played tapes in cycles, a kind of diary of terror. What you heard now is just one of the dozens of recordings he made of his victims. My stomach turned. The image of the radio in the Blue House, the red light on, Judith's tape, everything fitting together like a jigsaw puzzle made of bone fragments. But how did this end up in the police station's system? There was an electric shock in the city last week, wasn't there? I nodded, still not understanding. The old system in the house probably had a power outage, an overload. That could have activated the old recorder. The line that was used, the same one your father never told you to turn off, sent a coded signal, and that signal, due to a routing error at the police station's central office, was processed as an automated report. I closed my eyes. I felt my breath catch. The complaint was not new. It was an echo, a digital ghost crossing decades to reach me. So, Judith, she doesn't... No, she is not alive. That voice was not made now. But it has reached you now, because someone or something wanted you to see it, to know it. I gasped. My hands were shaking, and deep down I knew Monroe was right. It wasn't just a technical glitch. It was more than that. It was as if the past had waited until I was ready to receive it. I stood up slowly. My legs were wobbly. Monroe looked me in the eyes for the first time since the beginning of the conversation. I should have told you before, but no one had the courage. Your father was destroyed inside, and now the truth is yours. I left his house with the world spinning in slow motion. The pieces were falling into place, but the pain didn't diminish. On the contrary, it grew. And the worst part was that I knew it wasn't the end yet, because there are things that once revealed don't stay silent. They move, they demand, and something told me that the Blue House hadn't said everything yet. Do you think the truth sets you free, or does it just open the door for something worse to appear? I woke up the next day with a strange feeling in my body, the kind that feels like a warning, the kind of heaviness that comes not from tiredness, but from awareness. There was a bitter taste in my mouth, as if I had spent the night swallowing memories that weren't mine, and in a way, that was exactly what I was. I was now carrying a story that didn't belong to me, a story that my father had kept buried, a story that the city had buried, along with its silence. But I couldn't pretend anymore. I went back to the station, and for the first time since it all began, I walked into my father's office. It was still there, preserved as he had left it, his pens lined up, the framed picture of us, and the old folder with the city crest on it, on the corner of the desk. I had never had the courage to touch any of it, but now I had to, not as a son, but as a sheriff. I began to review old files, correspondence, informal records. I spent hours cross-referencing names, addresses, land, public donations. It was a poorly written note on the back of a rural donation document that caught my attention. EMS, relative, do not touch. It was in my father's handwriting. EMS were my uncle's initials, Elias Monteiro dos Santos. The land mentioned was at the back of a farm 15 minutes from the city, abandoned for decades. I got in the car and went. The dirt road cut through the field like a poorly healed scar. The gate was down, and the grass almost swallowed up the entrance. I parked and continued on foot, and it was there, behind the old tool shed, that I saw him, sitting on a makeshift wooden chair under a torn tarp stuck between two trees. His face was sunken, covered by an unkempt white beard, his gaze lost on the horizon as if he was no longer expecting anyone. But when I approached, he saw me, and he knew. "You're Carlos's son," he said, before I could open my mouth. I nodded, hands on my belt, heart hammering in my chest. "Do you know who I am?" I asked. He laughed, a weak, dry, joyless sound. "I'm the family's nightmare, aren't I? The brother who disappeared, the name that no one says." I approached slowly. His smell was a mixture of sweat, time, and something bitter, almost like rust. "Elias Monteiro dos Santos, you are wanted for obstruction of justice, concealment of a corpse, and suspicion of murder. Do you have anything to say before I take you in?" He didn't answer right away. He just looked at the ground, and then he murmured, low, almost like a lament. I never knew how to deal with what I did, or with who I was. "Did you kill Judith Monroe?" He was silent, his eyes fixed on something only he could see, and then he nodded. "She saw me, when she shouldn't have. She knew too much. The voice trailed off. "I didn't want to. But it happened. Then Then there was only silence. And the weight. I took out the handcuffs. I pointed them at him. "Get up. Now." He didn't resist. He didn't protest. He just held out his wrists with the calm of someone who had been waiting for this moment for a long time. On the way back, he didn't say anything else, but his eyes, the same eyes as my father's, stared out the window of the police car the whole time, as if he were reliving everything, as if he were walking through the blue house once again inside his own head. The next day, with the warrant authorized, I took an excavation team to the back of the blue house. The dirt was soft in one spot, just behind the side porch, where the shadow never quite reached the ground. We dug for hours. Each shovelful of dirt was a sigh caught in our throats. Until we found it. First the chain, then the bicycle, still intact, just rusted. And finally, the remains of Judith Monroe, wrapped in an old sheet, along with a cassette tape and a doll with half its face missing. The DNA test confirmed what we already knew. It was her. The bulletin was officially closed. The report was written. The remains were sent for a dignified burial. The city, in silence, finally acknowledged the loss. It never had the courage to mourn. And I stood on the sidelines of the funeral, without a uniform, without a badge, just a son trying to mend the flaws he inherited. Judith was buried with simple flowers and a small plaque. "Now you have a place to rest." Uncle Elias died 2 months later in prison, without visits, without an official confession other than the one he made to me. No one claimed the body. The town seems to have returned to normal since then. The young people stopped telling stories about the Blue House. The street was paved. Someone even talked about demolishing the place and building a community center. But the truth is that the silence now has a different weight. Lighter, perhaps. More honest. Justice, even though late, came, and brought with it the peace that no one knew they needed. But sometimes when I pass near that street, I think I hear a metallic sound, like a tape recorder turning on by itself. A dry, quick, almost imperceptible click. And then, for a second, I ask myself, was everything really buried? I grew up wanting to honor my father. The man the town admired, the serious sheriff, the firm father, the respected citizen. I looked at him as if I were looking at an insurmountable, solid, indestructible wall. And everything I did, every step of my career, every choice, every sacrifice, was to get as close as possible to that ideal. I wanted to carry the badge with the same determination. I wanted to do justice with the same conviction. But above all, I wanted to prove to myself that I was worthy of his legacy. But what I discovered broke me inside, because in the end, my father was human too. And humans make mistakes. They are afraid. They keep quiet. They protect what they shouldn't. Sometimes they do it out of love. Sometimes they do it out of shame. Sometimes both at the same time. The man who taught me to be fair covered up the worst kind of injustice, and I had to look into the eyes of this contradiction and choose, honor my father or honor the truth, and I chose the truth. But that was harder than it seems, because the truth didn't give me peace. It didn't applaud me. It didn't hug me at the end of the day saying I did the right thing. The truth left me in pieces. It made me bury the image of the hero I had in my memory once and for all. It made me confront the history of my family, the city, and myself. It made me realize that sometimes the only way to be fair is to accept that the one you loved most was also responsible for a silence that killed. Justice came. The city breathed. But I'm still here. I go back to the police station every morning, as I always have. I do my job. But something has changed. A part of me stayed in that excavation. Another part stayed at the moment Mauro told me the truth. And the part that remains looks at everything with different eyes. The police station system is new now, digital, modern, silent, but it still has that sound, that bip dry that notifies you when a complaint arrives, and every time I hear it, my heart stops for a second. Not because I'm afraid of another recording, or because I think Judith is back, but because for a moment, for a cruel, inevitable moment, I ask myself, what if it's someone who has also waited too long to be heard? Do you think that, even late, it is worth opening certain doors? Sometimes the truth takes a while to be heard, but it finds a way. It may be hidden behind decades of silence, buried under well-intentioned lies, shelved in folders that no one dares to open. It may come through the voice of someone who is no longer here, or in a fragile sound lost in an old system, forgotten even by time. But when she decides to come out, when she finally speaks, there is no one who can ignore it. It comes like a whisper that goes through your bones, like a memory you never had, but that haunts you anyway. And then everything changes, because the truth, when it arrives, takes its toll. It takes courage, it takes sacrifice, it takes blood. In my case, it took away the image I had of my father, and in exchange, it gave me back the name of a girl that everyone preferred to forget, a life that finally had the right to be heard. And that, for me, was worth every scar. If this story made you feel something, a shiver, a doubt, a memory you didn't even know you had, then it did its job. Because here, each story leaves a mark. And maybe, today, you've understood why some truths simply, they can't keep quiet anymore. Now you can make this story resonate even further. Just hit the like button and subscribe. This shows that it's worth continuing to share these confessions, and it helps other people experience this together. Write the word here in the comments, true. That's it. Whoever has seen this far will know, and whoever comes later will understand that there is something deeper going on here. And look, the next video is already on the screen, and I tell you as calmly as I can, if this story touched you, the next one will leave you speechless. Because there are secrets that are not in the past. They are alive, lurking, waiting for someone brave enough to hear what was never said. And maybe that someone is you. Go on, press play. I'll wait for you inside.